Good morning. It's the Kevin McCullough Show live from what we call the Concrete Canyon. There's the peek into Times Square. Here in New York, it rained, for the full 24 hours yesterday? It felt like that. I'm not sure if it did rain exactly every second of every bit of yesterday, but it sure felt like that. Every time we went anywhere near the out of doors, it was just pouring. And so we're trying to dry out a little bit in New York this morning, but I'm glad that you're with us. And thanks for welcoming me back to the Extreme Media Studios. Got an exciting show. Carrie Arbin, the Chief Serving Officer of Actors, Models, and Talent for Christ, will be with us in the second hour. She's got not only a compelling story of her own to talk about in terms of how this agency came about, but also what it could do for your child, your grandchild, if you believe that they have certain skills that are unique and should be pursued. And so I'm looking forward to that conversation. She's in town because a big showcase went down this weekend here in the New York area, and we'll be asking her all about that. We're also going to talk about this story that was put out on Friday, this whole issue of whether or not Sesame Street should, cause Bert and Ernie to get married. But that's not the only issue. The issue is really the idea of, because there's this really odd comment by a Washington Post columnist who said that they should introduce that content on Sesame Street because, quote, preschoolers will get it. I've got some concerns about that, but we'll talk about that coming up. 877-572-8446 is my phone number, 877-572-8446. God, life, and news, the three things we cover every day on the Kevin McCullough Show. And we start with the early morning God thought, mostly because God is, in my opinion, the foundation, the wellspring, the origin, the source of where all truth comes from. And so if that's our starting point, what we do after that certainly counts, but where we start certainly counts as well. We've been going through the Ray Pritchard book this year, He's God and We're Not, studying the 7 laws of the spiritual life. You can get a free copy at his website, keepbelieving.com. It's a free electronic copy or a PDF. You can download it and print it out if you want to. But it's really designed to be read off the electronic reading device of your choice, your laptop, your iPad, your Kindle, your Nook. Whatever you use, feel free to do that. They still have a free download of the book available at keepbelieving.com. But I want to get into where we have been focusing for a few weeks, which is what is this idea of faith? Now, just to review the spiritual laws that we've studied so far, He's God and we're not. God doesn't need us, but we desperately need Him. What God demands, He also supplies. Number 4, what you seek, you find. That's the first time when it kind of turns to our attention, what we're supposed to be about. And then the 5th that we've been looking at now for a few weeks is active faith releases God's power. Active faith releases God's power. So with that, we've been studying what the definition of faith is. We've been looking at it. And Ray, in recent days, has been explaining what it is to live by faith, what it is to have faith be involved in that decision-making process for us. And he adds to that thought today. He says, those who live by faith will enter into what he calls the joy of the Lord. They will have a deeper joy and greater satisfaction here, even while they are being rejected and ridiculed by those around them. Let me read that for you one more time. Those who live by faith will enter the joy of the Lord. They will have a deeper joy and a greater satisfaction here, even while they are being rejected and ridiculed by those around them. What is this all about? Why is he going down this path? Well, it's simple. We've been talking about what it means to live by faith, and he's been saying this and this and this are all indicative of people who live by faith, and this is why it's important. And he adds this last little caveat that's kind of an odd thing. We haven't talked about this thing called the joy of the Lord thus far in our study of the 7 spiritual laws. But he does introduce it into this dynamic. And you need to ask yourself the question, why? Why would the author, why would Ray Pritchard associate living by faith with what he calls the joy of the Lord? I think it's one of the great secrets, one of the great mysteries, one of the great benefits of the Christian life in total. Recently, I have had reason to be interacting with people of very many different faiths. I've had many recent conversations with a person who would describe himself as a religious Jew. I have had many conversations recently with a woman who proudly identifies as lesbian and not, it's kind of a backslidden Jew, but not really religious at all, and claims to be married to a woman who is a Christian of some sort. Mainline, I think, I don't know. There are people that are interacting in these conversations who are Buddhist and Muslim and Sikh, and it's been very kind of interesting to walk through this experience with these people having conversations about what I do for a living. And so much so that when the actor Stephen Baldwin, who's my business partner, and you see us together on Saturday nights on many of these same stations, when he was with me the last time, late last week, we were having some of these same conversations, and Stephen was like, do they understand who we are? And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, just the fact that we're Jesus people. And I said, I'm not too worried about that. And he said, well, okay, I was just asking the question. But this idea that those who live by faith have what Ray calls the joy of the Lord, I call it an immense confidence in God's provision and protection. That the joy of the Lord is this kind of immutable, unchangeable confidence that God is ultimately sovereign and ultimately in control and ultimately about what He is about. And because of that, I'm kind of free. I'm kind of free to be unworried about those outcomes. Yes, I want to communicate what He is to me in a way that is non-offensive, in a way that makes as much sense as possible, in a way that I should say this, unnecessarily offensive. Jesus will be offensive to some regardless of what context you put Him in, but He doesn't want to be introduced into people's lives as an element that is intended to hurt people. So there's this natural kind of confidence, this joy, this joy that is unexplainable. What is joy? Well, our culture puts a lot of emphasis on being happy. We do 10-point sermons on how to have a happy marriage. We do, a 5-point lesson plan on how to raise happy kids. Happiness is really not discussed in the Bible at all. It really isn't. Happiness is in my opinion, is a pretty satanic idea. Happiness is shallow. It is giddiness over circumstances being good and in your favor. Happiness does not take you to a place of deeper spiritual understanding. But there is something very similar to happiness that looks very much like happiness in some ways, that is very spiritual, that goes very deep, and is not dependent upon your circumstances to give you that same sense of confidence and contentment, and yes, even a smile on your face, and that is joy. Joy is a spiritual component. The most joyful people I have ever known have been people that have lived some of the hardest lives I've ever heard of. And so it is very unusual to understand what this sense of joy of the Lord is really all about. But Ray tries to describe it here, and it's connected to living by faith, because he says those who do live by faith enter into this unmistakable, unexplainable joy. And he says this is how it's known. They will have a deeper joy and a greater satisfaction here when, even while they are being rejected and ridiculed by those around them. What? How is that supposed to happen? That's not very American. In America, we think of having a good time and having the party and everybody around you saying nice things and, hey, way to go, and it's all good. The joy that Jesus gives the human who follows him is so miraculous. It's so unexplainable. It runs so deep that it is even present while being rejected or even ridiculed. If your faith and trust is in the living God, if it is in the substance of the creator of the universe, then you can take that joy with you, and you are almost bulletproof in terms of anyone being able to take it away from you. It is truly an astounding, life-changing, life-breathing type of element to life. You want more joy? Trust Jesus more. You want more joy? Look to God and put more faith in him. You want to know more joy? Give everything that you are over to the one who made you, because that's where it's found. That's where it's found. Kevin McCullough, glad you're with us each weekday. Join us for the God Thought. First thing, every morning on the Kevin McCullough Show. As we get underway, you can find the God Thought Facebook group at thebingethinker.com. And speaking of Facebook groups, the Sesame Street Facebook page came under controversy on Friday. We'll tell you what that's about in our practical dilemma coming up next.
What heart could hold the weight